near the village again, yet not so near to it as they had been when they encountered, for Leothric drove Tharagavverug farther in the day than Tharagavverug had forced him back in the night. Then Leothric drove him again with his stick, till the hour came when it was the custom of the dragon crocodile to find his man. 1/3 of his man he would eat at the time he found him, and the rest at noon and evening. But when the hour came for finding his man, a great fierceness came on Tharagavverug, and he grabbed rapidly at Leothric, but could not seize him, and for a long while neither of them would retire. But at last the pain of the stick on his leaden nose overcame the hunger of the dragon crocodile, and he turned from it howling. From that moment Tharagavverug weakened. All that day Leothric drove him with his stick, and at night both held their ground. And when the dawn of the third day was come, the heart of Tharagavverug beat slower and fainter. It was as though a tired man was ringing a bell. Once Tharagavverug nearly seized a frog, but Leothric snatched it away in time. Towards noon the dragon crocodile lay still for a long while, and Leothric stood near him and leaned on his trusty stick. He was very tired and sleepless, but had more leisure now for eating his provisions. With Tharagavverug the end was coming fast, and in the afternoon his breath came hoarsely, rasping in his throat. It was as the sound of many huntsmen blowing blasts on horns, and towards evening his breath came faster but fainter, like the sound of a hunt going furious to the distance and dying away. And he made desperate rushes towards the village, but Leothric still leapt about him, battering his leaden nose. Scarce audible now at all was the sound of his heart. It was like a church bell tolling beyond the hills for the death of some one unknown and far away. Then the sun set and flamed in the village windows, and a chill went over the world, and in some small garden a woman sang, and Tharagavverug lifted up his head and starved, and his life went from his invulnerable body, and Leothric lay down beside him and slept. And later, in the starlight, the villagers came out and carried Leothric sleeping to the village, all praising him in whispers as they went. They laid him down upon a couch in a house, and danced outside in silence, without psaltery or cymbal, and the next day, rejoicing to Allathurion, they hauled the dragon crocodile. And Leothric went with them, holding his battered staff, and a tall, broad man, who was smith of Allathurion, made a great furnace, and melted Tharagavverug away, till only Sacnoth was left, gleaming among the ashes. Then he took one of the small eyes that had been chiselled out, and filed an edge on Sacnoth, and gradually the steel eye wore away, facet by facet, but ere it was quite gone it had sharpened redoubtably Sacnoth. But the other eye they set in the butt of the hilt, and it gleamed there bluely. And that night Leothric arose in the dark, and took the sword, and went westward to find Gaznak. And he went through the dark forest till the dawn, and all the morning, and till the afternoon. But in the afternoon he came into the open, and saw in the midst of the land where no man goeth the fortress of Gaznak, mountainous before him, little more than a mile away. And Leothric saw that the land was marsh and desolate, and the fortress went up all white out of it, with many buttresses, and was broad below, but narrowed higher up, and was full of gleaming windows with the light upon them. And near the top of it a few white clouds were floating, but above them some of its pinnacles reappeared. Then Leothric advanced into the marshes, and the eye of Tharagavverug looked out warily from the hilt of Sacnoth. For Tharagavverug had known the marshes well, and the sword nudged Leothric to the right or pulled him to the left, away from the dangerous places, and so brought him safely to the fortress walls. And in the wall stood doors like precipices of steel, all studded with boulders of iron, and above every window were terrible gargoyles of stone, and the name of the fortress shone on the wall, writ large in letters of brass: The Fortress Unvanquishable, save for Sacnoth. Then Leothric drew and revealed Sacnoth, and all the gargoyles grinned, and the grin went flickering from face to face right up into the cloud abiding gables. And when Sacnoth was revealed and all the gargoyles grinned, it was like the moonlight emerging from a cloud to look for the first time upon a field of blood, and passing swiftly over the wet faces of the slain that lie together in the horrible night. Then Leothric advanced towards a door, and it was mightier than the marble quarry Sacremona, from which of old men cut enormous slabs to build the Abbey of the Holy Tears. Day after day they wrenched out the very ribs of the hill until the abbey was built, and it was more beautiful than anything in stone. Then the priests blessed Sacremona, and it had rest, and no more stone was ever taken from it to build the houses of men. And the hill stood looking southwards lonely in the sunlight, defaced by that mighty scar. So vast was the door of steel. And the name of the door was the Port Resonant, the way of egress for war. Then Leothric smote upon the Port Resonant with Sacnoth, and the echo of Sacnoth went ringing through the halls, and all the dragons in the fortress barked. And when the baying of the remotest dragon had faintly joined in the tumult, a window opened far up among the clouds, below the twilit gables, and a woman screamed, and far away in hell her father heard her and knew that her doom was come. And Leothric went on smiting terribly with Sacnoth, and the grey steel of the Port Resonant, the way of egress for war, that was tempered to resist the swords of the world, came away in ringing slices. Then Leothric, holding Sacnoth in his hand, went in through the hole that he had hewn in the door, and came into the unlit cavernous hall. An elephant fled trumpeting, and Leothric stood still, holding Sacnoth. When the sound of the feet of the elephant had died away in the remoter corridors, nothing more stirred, and the cavernous hall was still. Presently the darkness of the distant halls became musical with the sound of bells, all coming nearer and nearer. Still Leothric waited in the dark, and the bells rang louder and louder, echoing through the halls, and there appeared a procession of men on camels, riding 2 by 2 from the interior of the fortress. And they were armed with scimitars of Assyrian make, and were all clad with mail, and chain mail hung from their helmets about their faces, and flapped as the camels moved. And they all halted before Leothric in the cavernous hall, and the camel bells clanged and stopped. And the leader said to Leothric, "The Lord Gaznak has desired to see you die before him. Be pleased to come with us, and we can discourse by the way of the manner in which the Lord Gaznak has desired to see you die." And as he said this he unwound a chain of iron that was coiled upon his saddle. And Leothric answered, "I would fain go with you, for I am come to slay Gaznak." Then all the camel guard of Gaznak laughed hideously, disturbing the vampires that were asleep in the measureless vault of the roof. And the leader said, "The Lord Gaznak is immortal, save for Sacnoth, and weareth armour that is proof even against Sacnoth himself, and hath a sword the second most terrible in the world." Then Leothric said, "I am the lord of the sword Sacnoth." And he advanced toward the camel guard of Gaznak, and Sacnoth lifted up and down in his hand as though stirred by an exultant pulse. Then the camel guard of Gaznak fled, and the riders leaned forward and smote their camels with whips, and they went away with a great clamour of bells through colonnades and corridors and vaulted halls, and scattered into the inner darkness of the fortress. When the last sound of them had died away, Leothric was in doubt which way to go, for the camel guard was dispersed in many directions. So he went straight on till he came to a great stairway in the midst of the hall. Then Leothric set his foot in the middle of a wide step, and climbed steadily up the stairway for 5 minutes. Little light was there in the great hall through which Leothric ascended, for it only entered through arrow slits here and there, and in the world outside evening was waning fast. The stairway led up to 2 folding doors, and they stood a little ajar, and through the crack Leothric entered and tried to continue straight on, but could get no farther, for the whole room seemed to be full of festoons of ropes which swung from wall to wall, and were looped and draped from the ceiling. The whole chamber was thick and black with them. They were soft and light to the touch, like fine silk, But Leothric was unable to break any one of them,